The station was quiet, too quiet. A silence so heavy that it pressed against the walls and filled the air like smoke. He sat in his small room, staring at the blinking lights on the old console, counting the slow rhythm of the machines that kept him alive. Every day felt the same, a cycle of waiting, repairing, and thinking about nothing, because thinking too much only made the silence louder. He had been alone for so long that he almost forgot how another voice sounded, almost forgot what it meant to share space with another person. Loneliness was heavy but safe. Loneliness had no surprises. Loneliness could not hurt him. Then he heard it. A whisper, soft, thin, and sharp, like a knife slipping through the air. "I can cook," the voice said. Gentle but clear. His eyes widened. He froze. His breath caught in his throat. For a moment, he thought it was his own mind breaking, playing tricks in the silence. But then it came again, closer this time. "I can clean," the whisper continued, almost musical, almost pleading. His heart pounded in his chest, fear rushing through his veins like fire. Someone was outside his door. No one should be here. This place was too far, too hidden. No ships had landed in months, maybe years. He stood up slowly, his legs trembling as he walked to the door. He reached for the panel, but stopped. Sweat dripping down his forehead. What if it was a trick? What if it was not human at all? Still, the whisper returned, soft as a breath. "I can be quiet," the voice said. His stomach twisted, his hands shook, but his curiosity was stronger than his fear. He had been alone for so long, and now someone was here, whispering through the dark. He leaned close to the door, his ear almost touching the metal. "Who's there?" he asked, his voice dry, broken from disuse. No answer came at first, only silence, and then, like the echo of a dream, "Please." The voice whispered, "Please let me in." The sound was not threatening. It was small, weak, yet filled with something strange. Not just a request, but almost a promise. His pulse thundered in his ears, his chest tight, his hand hovered. Over the door release, memories of old warnings came back to him. Stories of people who opened doors and never came back. But loneliness was a heavy chain. And the sound of that voice was a key turning slowly inside the lock. He pressed the panel, and the door slid open with a low hiss. Cold air rushed inside, carrying with it the faint smell of dust and smoke. And there she was, a woman, standing. In the shadow, her hair tangled, her face pale, her clothes torn like she had walked through fire. She looked at him with eyes to calm, eyes that seemed older than the stars. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them, thick as fog. Then she whispered again, her lips barely moving. "I can cook, I can clean. I can be quiet." The same words, the same rhythm. Like a spell spoken again and again, he felt something shift inside him. Fear and fascination twisting together. Who was she? Why had she come here? What did she want? He stepped back slowly, motioning her inside, his mind screaming warnings, but his body moving anyway. She crossed the threshold, silent, her footsteps making no sound. The door closed behind her with a hiss, locking them together in the room, and for the first time in years. He was not alone, but as he looked at her, as he saw the faint smile flicker across her lips, he realized something. This was not the end of his loneliness. This was the beginning of something else, something much bigger, much darker, and somehow, he knew his life would never be the same again. She stood in the dim light of his room, silent, almost like a shadow given shape. Her breathing was steady, her eyes fixed on him, and he could not look away. For years, he had dreamed of company, of a face other than his own reflection in the old metal walls. But now that she was here, standing so close, he felt more fear than comfort. It was as if she belonged here and did not belong here at the same time. He cleared his throat, his voice rough. "Who are you?" he asked. No answer came. Not at first. Only her gaze, sharp yet calm. Then she whispered again, the same words. Like a promise she could not stop repeating. "I can cook, I can clean, I can be quiet." Her voice trembled slightly, as if she was desperate for him to believe her. He did not move, his hands still hovering near the panel of the door. If this was a trick, if she was dangerous. He had trapped himself inside with her, but her shoulders sagged, her body looked tired. Her clothes torn, her skin marked with faint scars. She looked like someone who had run for a very long time. Against his own instincts, he stepped closer. "You are not supposed to be here," he said, his words low, almost a growl. Her lips parted, but instead of giving a reason, she only lowered her head. "I can stay quiet," she whispered, softer this time. The words felt strange, like they carried more than their surface meaning, almost like she was not speaking about silence, but about secrets. The thought unsettled him, but also pulled him closer. He pointed toward the small chair in the corner. She walked over slowly, her steps light, almost floating across the floor. She sat without sound, folding her hands in her lap like a guest waiting for instructions. The room felt smaller with her inside, the air heavier, charged with something he could not name. His mind raced with questions, but none found their way to his tongue. He only watched her, the flicker of the console lights reflecting in her dark eyes. Finally he asked, "How did you find this place?" Her answer was simple, yet impossible. "I followed the silence." The words made no sense. Yet the way she said them made him believe she meant them. He frowned, leaning against the cold wall. "There is nothing here. No one comes here." Her lips curved into the faintest smile, the kind that hid more than it revealed. "That is why I am here," she said. "Because no one comes here." The way she spoke was calm, almost too calm. It was the calm of someone who had walked through storms and found a place where the wind could not reach. But he felt something else in her tone, a weight, a shadow that clung to her words. Time passed slowly, each second heavy with unspoken thoughts. She did not ask for food, she did not ask for water. She only sat, still as stone, and yet there was an energy in the room, a quiet hum, as if her very presence was changing the place. Finally, she stood, moving to the small counter where he kept his supplies. Without waiting for permission, she began to tidy the clutter, stacking, sorting, wiping. No. Her hands moved with strange precision, too exact for someone exhausted. He watched her, confusion mixing with suspicion. Why would a stranger care about cleaning the space of a man she had just met? And yet, watching her, he felt something stir inside him. Something he had buried long ago, the memory of sharing space, of not being alone. When she finished, she turned to him, her face unreadable. "See," she whispered. "I can clean." The words made him shiver, not because of what they meant, but because of how she said them, as if she was proving herself, as if she was more machine than human, fulfilling a promise she had been programmed to repeat. He stepped back, uneasy, yet unable to order her away. Her presence was wrong, yet strangely right, like a missing piece that did not belong to the puzzle, but still fit perfectly. That night, he could not sleep. He lay on his narrow bed, listening to the silence. Except now, it was not silence. He could hear her breathing softly in the next room. Each breath reminded him he was not alone, and though he should have felt relief, he felt the opposite. His chest was tight, his mind restless. Questions spun in his head, circling like vultures. Who was she? Why had she come here? And why those words over and over? "I can cook, I can clean, I can be quiet." He closed his eyes, but when sleep finally came, it was broken by dreams. Dreams of whispers crawling through the dark halls of the station. Dreams of eyes watching him from the shadows. Dreams of a stranger who was not a stranger when he woke, his body drenched in sweat. He heard her voice again, faint but clear. "I can cook," she whispered. And when he rose and stepped into the room, he saw her already moving, already working, as if she had always been here, as if she belonged here. And though his life had been still for years, he knew it was about to change, in ways he could not. Yet imagine, the next morning began unlike any other he had known in years. For the first time since he arrived on the station, the air smelled different. Not the stale odor of recycled filters or metal, but something warm, something like food. He blinked awake, confused. His mind still heavy from restless dreams, he rose slowly, each step uncertain. Following the faint aroma drifting through the narrow halls, she was there, standing at the small counter. Her hands moving with skill, the old supplies he had ignored. For months were now spread before her, arranged with care. She stirred, sliced, cooked. And for a moment it felt like home, but he froze in the doorway, watching. Because something about her movements was not ordinary. Every action was too exact, too smooth. Like she had done this 1,000 times, she turned to him, her face calm, her eyes sharp, and she whispered again, "I can cook," she said, as if reminding him. As if reminding herself, her lips curved in a faint smile, but there was no warmth in it. Only certainty. He sat at the table, not because he trusted her, but because he was hungry. The food was simple, yet it tasted better than anything he had eaten in years. Still, with every bite, he felt a weight pressing deeper into his chest. She watched him silently, as if studying his every reaction. When he asked her name, she only shook her head. When the time is right, she whispered, "You will know." The words unsettled him, not because of what they said, but because of the calm way she said them, like she already knew more about him than she should. After breakfast, she began cleaning again, her hands never stopping. She fixed the broken panel near the door without being asked. She arranged the old tools in neat rows. Even the broken light above the console now glowed with soft life. He watched, silent. Because part of him was grateful, and part of him was afraid. It was as if she belonged to the station, as if the place had been waiting for her. He wondered if she was even human at all. That thought stayed in his mind, whispering louder than her voice, because when she moved, sometimes her eyes did not blink. When she spoke, sometimes her words sounded rehearsed, like lines spoken again and again, and when she was quiet, she would stare out the small window at the stars, her face empty, her lips moving without sound. He asked her once what she was thinking. She turned to him slowly, her eyes dark and endless. "I can be quiet," she whispered. And nothing more. The answer chilled him, because it felt less like a choice and more like a warning. Days began to blur. With her there, time moved differently. He was no longer alone, yet he felt lonelier in her silence. At night, he heard her voice repeating the same strange words in a language he could not understand. At first, he thought it was a dream. But then he saw her lips moving in the dark. Her whisper was steady, soft, but the words twisted like smoke. They were not from Earth, not from any tongue he knew. And when she noticed him watching, she only smiled faintly and said, "Do not be afraid." But fear was already there, sitting heavy in his bones one evening while he worked at the console. She stood behind him. "You are alone because you chose silence," she said. The words struck him like a knife. Because they were true, he had chosen this place, this exile. To escape the noise of the world. "How do you know that?" he asked, turning sharply. She tilted her head, her voice steady. "I know many things." Her calmness was worse than anger, worse than threat. It was the calm of someone who carried secrets too big to hold. He felt his throat dry, his hands cold. "Tell me who you are," he demanded, but again she only whispered. When the time is right, her promises lingered in his mind. I can cook, I can clean, I can be quiet. Simple words. Yet every time she spoke them, he felt more uneasy. It was not what she said, but how she said it, like a vow she was bound to repeat, like a role she could not escape. And each day he wondered if she was keeping these promises for him or for someone else who had come before. That night, he dreamed again. He dreamed of doors opening to endless darkness, of voices calling from beyond the stars, of a woman standing at the edge whispering, I can be quiet. When he awoke, sweat dripping down his face. He found her sitting by his bed, watching, waiting, silent. He almost shouted. But her calm gaze held him still. You dream loudly. She whispered, you must learn silence. Her words sank into him, heavy and cold. And for the first time since she arrived, he wished she had never come. Because her promises no longer sounded like comfort. They sounded like warnings, and he realized with a shiver that every promise she made might have another meaning. A darker meaning. One that would change his life forever. Days passed, and the station began to feel different. It was not brighter, not warmer, but alive in a way it had never been before. Every corner that had once been covered in dust now shone under her careful hands. The air smelled cleaner. The lights flickered less. Even the old machines worked smoother. It was as if the place itself responded to her presence. Like she carried order with her wherever she went. He found himself watching her more than he admitted. She worked without rest, fixing broken panels, sorting old supplies, repairing wires he had given up on years ago. When she moved with precision, as if she knew the design of the station better than he did. Once he asked, how do you know what to fix? She only looked at him, her dark eyes calm, and whispered, I see what is broken. The answer was simple, but it made his skin crawl, because it sounded less like she spoke of machines, and more like she spoke of him. His life began to change in small ways. For the first time in years, he ate meals that felt real. For the first time in years, he slept without hearing the endless groan of broken pipes. And for the first time in years, he was not alone. The silence that once comforted him now seemed lighter, softer, filled with her presence. But even as comfort grew, so did unease. Because behind every kindness she gave, there was a shadow, a question he could not shake. Why had she chosen him one evening while he was repairing an old console? He felt her standing behind him. Without a word, she leaned forward, her fingers brushing the wires. Adjusting them with exact precision, the machine lit up instantly. Glowing brighter than it had in years, he stared at her hands, then at her face. You are not just some wanderer, he said slowly. Who are you, really? Her lips moved into the faintest smile. When the time is right, she whispered, you will know. The same answer, again and again. It was a promise, or maybe a threat. He could not tell any more. Still, she made his days easier. He laughed once, not because she told a joke, but because the air felt lighter. She tilted her head, studying him with the same strange focus as always. That sound, she whispered, keep it. The way she said it unsettled him, as if laughter was something rare, something valuable, something she had not heard in a very long time. And when she smiled faintly afterward, it was not joy he saw in her expression. It was hunger, as if she had taken the sound and stored it deep inside herself. But the strangest thing happened when the station's systems failed one night. The lights went dark. Alarms howled through the halls. The air grew thin. He rushed to the console, panic clawing through his chest. He had seen failures before, but this one was different, heavier, dangerous. And then she touched the wall, placing her hand flat against the cold metal. Her eyes closed, her lips moved. whispering words in that strange language again. The alarm stopped, the lights flickered back to life. The machines roared awake. It was as if the station had listened to her. As if her whisper had been a command. He stared at her in shock, his heart hammering. "What did you do?" he demanded. She opened her eyes slowly, calm as ever, and whispered, "I helped." But he knew what he saw. That was not help. That was control. She was no ordinary woman. No lost traveler. There was power in her voice, power in her silence, power in her very presence. And now it was tangled with his life. Part of him wanted to push her out, force her away, lock the doors and forget her. But another part of him knew it was too late, because with every passing day, she became more tied to his survival without her. He was nothing but a man waiting for silence to consume him again. At night, he dreamed different dreams. He dreamed of her standing among stars, her whisper echoing across endless dark. He dreamed of her face shifting. No longer human, something more, something hidden. He dreamed of himself standing beside her, no longer alone, no longer forgotten. And when he woke, she was always near, watching, waiting, quiet. Sometimes she whispered softly in her sleep, words he could not understand. And once, when he leaned closer, he thought he heard his own name mixed inside those strange sounds. His blood ran cold. Because he had never told her his name each day. He felt the weight of choice pressing harder to accept her and the changes she brought, or to reject her and go back to the life of silence. But the truth was clear, even if he would not say it aloud. His life had already changed. The man who once lived in silence was gone. And the man who remained now stood in the shadow of something greater, something unknown. She had promised she could cook, she could clean, she could be quiet, and she had kept those promises. But hidden beneath them was another promise, a promise he had not yet heard. And when she finally spoke it, he knew everything would break. The days stretched into weeks, and his fear no longer came from the silence. It came from her, from the strange comfort she gave, from the changes she brought. His life was easier, cleaner, brighter, but behind every kindness there was a shadow. A question that grew heavier each night. Who was she really? He began to watch her more closely. Not when she cooked or cleaned, but when she thought he was not looking. When she stared at the stars through the narrow window, when her lips moved without sound, whispering in that strange, unknown language. When her hands brushed the walls of the station like she was speaking to it. It was in those quiet moments that the truth began to show. She was not just a lost traveler, not just a woman in need. She was something more. One night he could not hold his questions back. "You saved the station," he said, his voice sharp. "But how? No human can do what you did." She looked at him with her calm, endless eyes. "I told you," she whispered. "I help. I can fix. I can keep you safe." Her words were simple, but they struck him like blades because she never answered the question, only repeated the promises. It was as if the promises were a mask, hiding something far deeper. He decided to test her. The next day, he pretended to work on a broken panel near the oxygen system. He left the wires loose, waiting, watching, and, as expected, she appeared, silent as always, without a word. She bent down, her fingers moving faster than his eyes could follow. She fixed the panel in seconds, her touch almost glowing. When she stood, she whispered softly, "It works now." He stared, his throat dry. That was not skill. That was not training. That was something else, something not human. That night, he followed her. She moved quietly through the station, her steps making no sound. She stopped in front of the old communications room, a place he had not touched in years, a place that no longer worked. He hid in the shadows as she placed her hand on the broken console, Her lips moved. Her whisper filled the air. Not in his language, not in any language he knew. And then the console lit up. Its screens glowing faintly as if waking from the dead. He almost gasped, but held his breath. She was not repairing the station. She was commanding it. Her voice carried power. Power that should not exist. He stepped back, his heart racing. Every memory of her words came flooding back. I can cook, I can clean, I can be quiet. They were not promises of kindness. They were warnings of ability. Abilities far beyond what she should have. The next morning, when she entered the room, he confronted her. "What are you?" he demanded, his voice breaking. She stopped. Her eyes fixed on him, calm as ever. "I am what you need." She whispered. "No," he shouted. "Tell me the truth," for the first time since she arrived. She looked away. Her voice was lower now, heavy with something he could not name. "I am not from here," she said. "I do not belong to Earth. I do not belong to silence. I belong to the space between." Her words sent a chill through him. Not from Earth, not human. She was something else, something greater. She stepped closer, her face soft. Her whisper sharp. "I chose your door because you were forgotten, because no one would look for you. Because you were safe for me." He staggered back, his chest tight. "You used me," he said, his voice shaking. She did not answer at first, only watched him. Then she whispered, "I needed a place, but I did not lie. I can cook, I can clean, I can be quiet, and I can protect." The last words cut through the air like thunder. Protect, a promise he had never heard from her before. And one that terrified him more than all the others. She told him pieces of the truth, but never the whole, that she was running. That others were hunting her, that her enemies were powerful, merciless, and close. And by opening the door that night, he had tied himself to her fate. Whether he wanted it or not, he was part of her world now, and there was no going back. He sat alone later, his head in his hands. His life had been silence, safety, loneliness, but now it was filled with whispers, filled with danger, filled with a woman who was not human. And yet, when he thought of sending her away, his chest ached with a pain worse than fear, because somewhere deep inside, he knew the truth. He did not want her to leave, not because of the food, not because of the clean air, not even because she fixed the station, but because in her presence, for the first time in years, he felt alive. And that terrified him most of all. The truth hung in the air like smoke. He could not escape it, could not deny it. She was not human. She was not from Earth. She was something else. And yet, she was here, in his room, in his life, tied to him by choice and by fate. He sat at the table, his hands trembling, his breath unsteady. She stood across from him, silent, her eyes calm as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. He stared at her, his voice rough. "Why me? Why my door? Why my life?" Her answer came, soft, steady, like a whisper woven into the walls. "Because you were quiet, because you were forgotten, because you were safe." The words stabbed him, because they were true. He had chosen this exile to escape the world, and in doing so, he had made himself invisible. And now, that invisibility had made him her shelter. "But I don't want this," he said, his voice rising. "You brought danger here. You dragged me into something I never asked for." She tilted her head, her face unreadable. "Danger would come anyway," she whispered. "Whether you opened the door or not, the storm is already moving." Her words sent a chill down his spine. She spoke not like someone guessing, but like someone who knew, as if she had seen the storm herself, as if it was already on its way. He wanted to push her out, to lock the doors, to pretend she had never come. He wanted to return to silence, to safety. But deep inside, he knew that silence was already broken. Even if she left, her shadow would remain, her voice would remain, and his loneliness would be sharper than ever. Because once you hear another voice, you cannot unhear it. Once you feel life again, you cannot pretend it never touched you. That night, she sat beside him, closer than before. Her whisper was softer now, carrying weight it had never carried before. "You can send me away," she said, "and you will be safe for a little while. But the storm will find you. It always does." Her eyes locked on his, deep and endless. "Or you can keep me here, and together we may stand when it comes." Her words pressed against him. Heavy, dangerous, but also tempting. Together. The word echoed in his mind. He had not been part of together for years. The thought was like fire in his chest, terrifying and warm. He shook his head, trying to steady his voice. "You're asking me to risk my life for you, for something I don't even understand." She leaned closer, her whisper sharp and steady. "I am not asking you to risk. I am asking you to choose." Her words cut deep, because they were true. This was not something that could be avoided, not something that could be ignored. He would choose, whether he wanted to or not, to stand with her or to stand alone. For hours he sat awake, his mind torn apart by the weight of the decision. On one side, silence, safety, the life he had known for years. On the other side, danger, uncertainty, but also her voice, her presence, her strange promises that both frightened and comforted him. He closed his eyes, and in the dark he heard her whisper again. "I can cook, I can clean, I can be quiet, I can protect." The last words echoed louder than the rest. Protect? No one had ever promised to protect him before. No one had ever stayed long enough to even try. The choice burned inside him. He told himself he wanted her gone. Told himself she was a threat. But when he imagined the room empty again, when he imagined the silence without her whisper, the thought crushed him. He realized the truth with a shiver. It was not her who needed him. It was him who needed her. And that terrified him most of all. The next morning, he found her standing by the window, staring at the stars. Her face was calm, her body still, as if she was waiting. When he stepped closer, she turned, her whisper softer than ever. "You have decided," she said, not as a question, but as a fact. He swallowed hard, his throat dry, his chest heavy. "Yes," he said finally. "I choose you. I choose to stay." Her eyes softened, just for a moment, and he thought he saw something like relief. Then her whisper came again, steady and final. "Then together we will face it." But even as the words left her lips, the air seemed to shift. The walls groaned, the lights flickered. The station trembled, far beyond the windows. Shadows moved among the stars. Something was coming, something vast, something merciless. And he realized with a cold shiver that the storm she spoke of was no longer far away. It was already here. The storm had come. It began as a faint vibration in the metal walls, a whisper of something vast moving outside the station. But then, the shadows grew, swallowing the stars. The quiet world he had known for years was drowned in the presence of something far greater, far darker, and in that moment he understood she had not lied. She had warned him, and the danger was real. He stood at the window, frozen, watching the shapes slide through the void. They were not ships in any human sense. They were alive, moving. Like predators circling prey, the station groaned as if it too could feel their hunger. His breath caught, his chest tight, his heart hammering like it wanted to tear free. He turned to her, desperate. "What are they?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Her eyes remained calm, but her words carried weight. "They are my hunters, and now they are yours too." Fear clawed through him. He wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. He wanted to hide, but there was no hiding from shadows that covered the stars. She stepped closer, her voice soft. "You chose me." And now you must fight with me." He shook his head, panic rising. "I don't know how to fight them. I'm just a man. I can't." "I can't." Her hand touched his shoulder, steady, firm. "You are human," she whispered. "And that is enough." The words struck him harder than any weapon. Human, for years, he had thought of himself as nothing. A forgotten man hiding from the world, but she said the word like it mattered, like it meant something more than he ever believed. He clenched his fists, his fear still burning, but now mixed with something else. A spark, small, fragile, but real. If he was human, then he could act. If he was human, then he could fight. The shadows outside began to close in. The station shook, alarms blaring, air pressure dropping, panels sparked, wires screamed. The walls themselves trembled under the weight of the attack. She raised her hands, whispering in her strange language. Her voice pushing against the metal. The lights flickered, systems resisted. But it was not enough. Her power was strong, but their hunger was stronger. She turned to him. Her face calm, but her voice strained. "I cannot hold them alone. You must help me." He stared at the console, at the machines he had lived with for years. Old, broken, fragile, but familiar. He knew them better than anyone. Every wire, every weakness, every hidden strength. And suddenly he understood he could not fight like her, could not command with whispers. But he could fight like himself, with stubbornness, with creativity. With human hands and human will, he tore open panels, his fingers moving fast, sparks burning his skin. He rerouted power, forced systems to life that had been dead for years. He linked broken circuits, twisted wires into new paths, made the station scream louder than the shadows outside. The machines roared, the engines flared, the metal shook. He turned the entire station into a weapon. Not perfect, not clean, but alive. And that was enough. The shadows struck harder, but the station answered back. Alarms howled, lights flared. Energy surged through the walls. The predators reeled, unprepared for resistance. She added her voice to his effort, whispering in her strange tongue, pushing against the invaders with power that bent the air. Together, her whispers and his machines formed a storm of their own. The station became more than a shelter. It became a fortress, and for the first time, the hunters pulled back. He collapsed to his knees, his chest heaving, sweat pouring down his face. She knelt beside him, her hand on his shoulder, her voice calm again. "You see," she whispered, "you can fight." He looked at her, exhausted but alive. "I didn't win," he said, his voice broken. Her faint smile returned. "You endured, and that is what humans do." The shadows faded slowly into the dark. Not destroyed, but driven away. The stars returned, cold and distant, but free again. The silence of space filled the station, but it was no longer the same silence. It was heavy, but also alive. He leaned back, his body aching, his mind burning. He had thought himself nothing, a forgotten man hiding from the universe. But tonight he had fought, not with strength, not with power, but with human stubbornness, and that was enough. She stood, looking at him with something almost like respect. "You can cook, you can clean, you can be quiet," she whispered, repeating the words that had haunted him. Then she leaned closer, her voice softer, sharper, but more than that. "You can fight, you can endure. You are human, and that makes you stronger than them." Her words wrapped around him, not as chains, but as fire, and for the first time in years, he believed them. The door he had once opened in fear had brought her into his life, and though the storm was not over, though the hunters would return, he was no longer afraid of silence, because silence no longer meant loneliness. It meant waiting, preparing, enduring, and when the storm came again, he would be ready. Not because he had her, not because of her strange power, but because he had finally remembered who he was. Human and humanity, in all its fragile, stubborn strength, was enough.